This goes in towards, our last question. Does progression, metrics, or even what we're just talking about just then, and methods change as you get more advanced? Okay, so Connor, we'll kick you off. We'll get you started with this one. So the more advanced you are as an athlete, or whatever, the progression methods and things like that, do they start to change?
I think it's worthy first off mentioning that the more trained you are, the harder you'll find progress. So that's just something we call the law of diminishing returns. The more you do something, you get less of feedback over time. You can even try this at home, like flicking your hand. You'll notice and feel something immediately. You keep flicking that same spot, it'll become more numb. The main word, desensitized. I know Nick mentioned a while ago, like maintenance periods and how they can resensitize you both physically and psychologically and the like. But yeah, eventually, anyway, you have the law of diminishing returns. So it's hard to get a response. So suddenly just a blanket do this kind of thing isn't okay, it's good, but needs to be really, really specific. You're looking for a specific stimulus. So at this stage, when you're really advanced, adherence, yeah, it's important. You got to care, but usually that's what knocks people off in the beginner to intermediate stages. I'm just going to hypothetically talk about advanced, and you're going to be pretty good to adhere. So there, you've got to look into the little, like the slips, the cracks in their training that they're just missing out on. Like, for example, you look at a lift of a squat, they are particularly strong, the top 2/3 of the movement, they're particularly weak the bottom. You can look at, again, range, you can look at exercise selection, you can look at tempo, you can look at anything that's going to contribute to the actual stimulus. And then there, you've got to go really unique and dig right into it. So as like Prime Tick was mentioning with like progressive overload, or how it's usually seen as progressive overload training, which is like low volume, Dorian Yatesy and the like. And then you move to a giant set kind of thing. It is an overloading stimulus, but you got to find the cracks there. So the one crack of the low volume thing is you don't get some of the adaptations of high volume. There's many weaknesses of the high volume, but you might miss out on some of the really high effort, high threshold motor units that are only gathered in the really hard and intense sets that you can only achieve at low volumes, because you wouldn't be able to achieve it at high volumes. Basically, you're trying to find the little cracks. So as for the metrics, honestly, you go for the same metrics for the most part in terms of you just look at all the qualitative and quantitative things that make you better. It's just sometimes it's going to be a lot different route to get there. So instead of being a straight road from A to B, it'll be a road of A to D, C, B. That was a hard example.
So would you say this is where, for an advanced athlete, this is where exercise selection is just so important? Because when you're thinking about some of the strongest, athletes in the world that can squat ridiculous amounts, think about the fatigue that accumulates, when you can squat that much, and the amount of time it takes to recover in order to squat that amount again, or more, whether that's more sets. To be honest, if someone's squatting, 400 kilos, seriously, doing multiple sets of that would kill me. But would you say, more on the, let's say, the hypertrophy based exercise selection, really comes into play a lot, especially towards those people that do tend to do higher volume type workouts?
Sorry, just to clarify the question, does exercise selection matter more to people who do high volume workouts?
Well, yeah, like, yes.
As you're stronger as well?
As you get stronger, that's the main point.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things when you get stronger is in terms of thresholds and recovery. So how trainable you are, what's your recovery like? Nick said maximum recoverable volume, which is basically the volume you can recover from. That number actually goes down as you get stronger and more trained. Like a lot of things go up in time, but that actually goes down because you create more fatigue per set because you're using more weight. Your 30-inch quad is bigger than your 20-inch quad that it used to be. So there's more damage and recovery from that consequential breakdown, which is one of the weird reasons why more advanced athletes belong at a lower training frequency than a more newer one. So as for exercise selection, you're dealing with less recovery, but the stimulus thresholds are even higher. So it's hard for people with just audio only, but the gap between how much you can recover from and how much you need that gap is closing. And sometimes you're in a caloric deficit, it's almost the same. You need to just perfect things just to maintain things on the physique side of things. So suddenly, okay, doing a 70% movement is not going to cut it. You need something that's, or at least across all your exercises, going to train something in every single range of motion that you need at the exact tension and thresholds you need. So for example, if you're after muscle damage of the hamstrings, so you know the length and position is something you need to target, for example. Lying leg curl just won't cut it because your architecture, as well as how the weight is delivering tension, it just won't cut it on the lying leg curl for getting that muscle damage the best you can. You're probably going to need something that's going to overload you in the stretch position. And not just that, you need the right exercise, but you need to multiply at the right tempo. You don't do a 2-second squeeze of the hamstrings at the top of the movement of an RDL. It's not going to benefit you as much as a 2-second hold in the stretch. The same thing applies across to lying leg curl. The peak contraction is the most beneficial part there, but the stretch is the RDL. So you need to line up the training with the tempo, which all comes back to the stimulus. The stimulus needs to be above the threshold. It all ties to stimulus and threshold. And as you get more advanced, you need to nail these things because you haven't got recovery to waste. It's really hard. So to get those thresholds, to do enough of the right stuff, but to not overtrain yourself, that gap becomes smaller. So you need to look into the mechanics of things, the moment arms. You need to look into what ranges of motion, target muscles more. You also need to understand your own muscle strength curve as well as like the weight strength curve. You need to understand that you're stronger on an eccentric versus a concentric. All these different strength curves. You line all these things up to get the right stimulus. And you just got to nail it at that stage, because just walking to the gym and doing the same thing you've done for years ain't going to cut it, because again, that progression overload principle and hitting those thresholds. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah. That's basically it. And so for the viewers out there, just to clarify, so you're saying that as an advanced athlete or an athlete that's becoming more advanced, the amount of volume decreases as you get stronger. Is that correct?
You can recover from less volume. Yeah, that's fair to say.
You can, yeah. So would you say if they were to do more volume, how would you describe, would they would you start to see regression? Is that tend to be the...
So again, if you go over that maximum recoverable volume that we're talking about, at the point of maximum recoverable volume, you're at maintenance. Anything above that, you are regressing, because what you're doing, you're not recovering from. You need the full healing process. You grow outside the gym is something you might have heard. It's one of those weird things. We need to do more, you can get away with less at the start of the year because of those low thresholds, those quote unquote minimum effective doses. But as you get more advanced, you need to do more to a degree on a big sense. I mean, you have to do more sets, but you need to do more in some way, shape or form. As you get older, but more advanced, recoverability goes down. And then you get into the regression. So again, before that, why it matters to track these things is to make sure the bank account is going in the right direction. Is what I'm doing now making me money? So maybe you're doing, you're overworking yourself, then your work's poor, then you get fired. That's a weird example. Tied to finances, you don't make the money. So again, there is too much training you can do, and you get to that stage, you won't get the adaptations you want. So you need, again, have those quantitative and qualitative checkpoints, not just about my progressing, but hey, am I doing too much? And you might use things such as, again, performance, look, sex drive, energy, things like that to see if I'm actually doing too much, like higher chance of injury, all these things.
One of the things that I personally like to do, so say for example, you take an exercise and you go through mesocycle after mesocycle after mesocycle, and you take it to absolute brick. You get ridiculously strong in it, and then maybe you hit a plateau. You tend to substitute that exercise out, replace it with something else, and then you take that exercise now, and then you just take it all the way to the end, and then you bring that other exercise back in, right? Is that something? Is that how you would do your programming if you've taken an exercise to the brink?
Okay.
You bring it out and then you bring it back in.
You are hugely speaking to the Dante Trudell, Scott Stevenson, Jordan Peters crowd. And that's like a thought process. And that's I love those people. They're really forefront people. And a lot of these people probably thought of this question, but eventually you do get to the stage where you're stagnated. Now, at that stage, when you, again, I've done it before, you just, okay, you progressively overload, you're revealing your capacity, you do more, and then you're stagnant the week after, stagnant the week after. Usually, from what I understand, I can't speak to 100% absolutes all the time, the answer is to switch out an exercise. And there is value to that because variety is a handy training principle. So it's interesting that specificity is important, so you get good things you practice, yet just like going from tension to metabolic stress or ice cream to banana split, variety has more of a response later on. But once you get there, the question would be, well, okay, I was stagnant week A, week B, week C, but you're progressing all that before that. Well, what makes me better or worse week to week? And what do you need? You need, like, just like you need muscle protein synthesis to exceed muscle protein breakdown, you need whatever stimulus you're doing to reap more of a training effect than whatever fatigue is causing things. So you just got to get the right stimulus. So like people are big into like philosophy, psychology, those things. The big question they always ask themselves is the why. And you keep searching deeper and it's like, why? They're big in that field. The center of all this shit is the right stimulus. So usually with those people, it's like, okay, was the amount of volume I'm doing right? Was tempo, reps from reserve, all those things? Were they the right thing to get me through the next week? Because just changing exercise, you're going to, look, you get great results, don't get me wrong. Like that, this is really advanced, but you need to look into, okay, why didn't I progress week A to week B to week C before I change those exercise? And you need the right stimulus. And sometimes that's where they're missing because that's where you should be getting better and better and better. Again, it's hard. There's less of like a response. And sometimes you'll improve 1%, but the smallest weight increment you can add is 2.5%, like in terms of like a weight on a barbell, for example. So sometimes it just doesn't add up. But that's the only part that's missing of that because it was so good with so many things, the Dante crowd. But that's probably the last thing that's missing. Like what stimulus will get me to the next stage? And yeah, variety of exercise is handy, but it's also just waiting for a problem to occur later.
So do you think people substitute things out too early?
They can do. I think in a lot of sense, people can blame the wrong thing, like for why they're not progressing as well. It's like, was it the exercise or was it, the amount of sets? Was it the frequency? Was it which, physiological pathway was under? Was it my sleep? Was my eating? Like same thing, like people are like, oh,
there's so many different things. Yeah.
I added beta alanine into my protocol and I added 5 kilos of muscle mass. Motherfucker, you also started trend. Like, don't contribute it towards like the one thing, So in terms of is exercise the answer? Sometimes, but usually not. Usually it's like exercise is part of the stimulus. So it's what you're doing. Like the exercise itself is like the mechanical side, but then all the physiological things underneath that encompass that as well. It's all got to tie together, like the muscle damage being a better choice for a stretch position for the hamstrings, a better choice isn't as good as a choice at the same time for a lying leg curl for a contracted position. So you just got to line all that shit up together. You line the tempo, you line how much you can recover from an RDL. I think you'll find, for example, you can recover from more sets for lying leg curl than an RDL to a degree. Maybe not in the workout, but across the week, so again, you just got to look at these things. So everything's got to tie together to that big why, the stimulus. It's got to all zoom in and all work towards one thing. And that's something that Kasim Hansen has been really good at producing. So everything's got to lie to it. So if it's mechanical tension, what's going to have tension across the whole range? And you use, okay, what kind of tempo would best enhance that? What kind of exercise, like you're saying, would best enhance that? With that, how many sets can you do? What's rep range has a trade-off of having a good amount of tension, but getting enough of it, so but make sure it's also high at the same time and hitting the intensity thresholds. It's all got to line together. And this is the key to that next level advanced progression, because again, you've only got so much room, but you've got to fucking add up that little 1% here and 1% here, 1% there, and then you get a 10% response. When if you just go, same old work you've done for years, you're probably not going to achieve that. So implementing the principles of variety, stimulus, all these different things at the right time with the right methods all together to get the biggest magnitude of response. Yeah.
Viewers, you can see why I was picking Conor's brain on that one, because I knew like in the back of my mind, this guy has got some knowledge based on that. So thank you, Conor, for sharing all that information.
I hope you enjoyed that small clip from the Forge Intelligence podcast. If you want to check out the full episode along with a lot more content, go to our channel. If you like the video, like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for listening.